Hello, and thanks for joining us. Coming up on today's show, she's one of the only female war photographers of the past century. For 30 years, she travelled to the world's hotspots, documenting conflict through the faces of women and children. Christine Spengler joins me as her exhibition opens in Paris. Christine, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to have you. Now, you have an exhibition on at the Maison Européenne de la Photographie in Paris until June. The images that we see here stand apart from what we typically think of as war photography. Is that because you're a woman, and is there such a thing as the female eye?
Well, this is a big discussion always, but I must say that I'm not ashamed at all when they tell me that I took pictures with the strength of a man, but a feminine eye, with tenderness of the women. And the fact of having been a female photographer and brown hair, it was easier for me to hide my Nikon under my veil in all the Arabic countries and even in the terrible Afghanistan of the Taliban, where I wear the burqa to enter in the hospital of women.
Okay, well, that's very interesting. Well, we've been speaking to some of the people who visited your exhibition. They seem to believe also in this idea of the female perspective. Let's have a listen.
I think maybe she's looking for something different than what a lot of male photojournalists might be seeking in their work.
The number of women in the photos were like that struck me because they're often, I think in history, they're often erased very easily. And so many of the photos were women.
I mean, anyone who takes pictures like that, it's an incredible achievement, but particularly for someone who was also a woman. I think it's quite inspirational.
There were people who've been to your exhibition. Now, on your photos taken in Iraq, in Vietnam, in Lebanon, we rarely see violence or dead bodies or injuries, but people attempting to have some sort of normal life. It was back when you were only 23, I think, when you discovered that you wanted to be a photographer. Tell us about the very first photo you ever took.
Well, I discovered, as you say, my vocation totally par hasard, by casualty, at age 23, in the heart of Chad, where I went with my brother, Eric, you just saw the picture. And when I was very small, brought up in Madrid, I just wanted to be a writer. And that day, when I saw these two fighters going hand to hand to the fight with these huge Kalashnikovs, I told Eric, please lend me one of these cameras. I want to testimony too. And this was my first picture of my life. After Eric and me have been put in jail during 23 days because they thought we were spies or journalists. After the 23 days when we came back in Land Rover in the desert because we were expelled from Niger, my decision was taken. I told Eric, you know, when I have a camera between my hands, I don't feel cold. I don't feel the sun. I'm not frightened. So I have the impression I've been born for this. And I told him, please give me one of these cameras and I will learn my job on the fields because I want to be a war reporter, to testimony always of the just causes.
You had clearly a talent very early on. In another photo that was taken in Northern Ireland, a famous photo of yours, you show us children clowning around in the midst of all the conflict going on. Tell us about this image.
This is one of my favorite, of course, especially because I met them again. And this was one of the first pictures of my life after the trip in Chad. And I was with famous Don McCullin that day in Northern Ireland, who took me to the barricades in Derry. When I received my first rubber bullet, he said, "Oh, you are baptized now, Christina." And then, although being so young, I was aware that I always have to be alone to take different pictures. And it is a very beautiful souvenir, despite I have been so sad to learn that this little one, the nicest one with his stones, he was fighting, he was throwing at the British soldiers. This one has died during the war.
Oh, it's terrible, terrible. And all this sadness, all this like tension that you must have collected over the years, you actually get rid of that through a very different form of photography that we see in the exhibition. That's sort of a photo montage in colour. Tell us about that.
Yes, that I did after every reportage, not before I was going to the war and today I do this. No, not at all. So it was a way for me to try to survive. All this red that you see in my pictures is, of course, is normal, the blood, that I cannot forget. So at the beginning, all the pictures was full of red, and this photo montage helped me to survive. And in the exhibition, there is a little chapel between the rooms of the war and the room of the color for the people to understand how I began to create these pictures, always with the portrait of the dead person in the middle, surrounded with flowers or objects. And this comes directly, totally from my war period and all the hours I spent in the cemetery of the martyrs in Iran, where the women, they were surrounded the portraits of the dead with red petals. And me, when I went back after the death of Eric at age 23, I went back to Alsace in Mulhouse 10 years after, and I saw the grave without any flower. I thought, I'm going to make an homage to you. And I remembered how we're doing the Iranian women. And now, happily, I wrote on the walls of the map, Maison Européenne de la Photo, that with this photo montage so full of color, I have found the way to abolish the barrier between the dead and the alive. And this is the impression I have now. And for example, the son of a famous writer, Marguerite Duras, the yellow picture you saw at the period of the L'Amant, this one, it is his son who came to see me because he just had the black and white little picture this of his mother. And he said, Christine, please, would you accept to surround them with color as you do? And I said, this was a wish, a desire of me because I adore your mother. So it's an immense pleasure. And I did 12 totally different, which I call Série Indo-Chinoise. And very soon I'm going to make a book with it.
And when you look back at all of your work, all together in this retrospective here in Paris, how does it make you feel?
Well, I'm very, very grateful that Jean-Luc Monterosso and Henri Chapier allowed me to show for the first time the color work as important as just the war. Because, you know, when you are one of the few female war photographers, especially me always dressed in black with veils, and for me, now I begin to be a little tired of this image because I am not just pain, dolor, grief, blackness. Thanks to my mother, you have shown her picture. She was called Huguette Spengler. She was a surrealist artist. I have inherited all this sense of color and Baroque because when we were very small, Eric and me, she was painting in front of us. And after the divorce of my parents, I've been sent to Madrid. So my new mother, second one, a lot of pictures of her too in the museum, she took me to the Prado Museum at the age of 7, twice a week. So now all these crazy things, for example, the virgins live. I am at least, for the first time, reconciliated with the both side of me, the darkness and the color, the light and the shadow.
Well, we're nearly out of time, Christine. We're going to end the show with something you've chosen. It's an Iranian film called No Land Song. Now, you worked a lot in Iran as a photographer. Is this why this particular film touched you?
Yes, I was, of course, moved by this Mollahs who give the, look at her face, the interdiction to the women in Iran to sing. And first, he forbid this group of women who wanted with French ladies to do a concert, not to lose and not to forget the Iranian voices. But then the Mollahs, every day, he tells them, no, if you sing, the voice of the man has obligatory to cover yours, you know? So after 2 or 3 years of fighting, happily, finally, they did it. So they succeeded and they sang